If you could have 1 hour uninterrupted one-on-one with a pediatrician to just ask all the nutrition and wellness questions that you want, this is the episode for you. We are talking social media. What are the diet trends that kids are seeing? How does it influence body image? Are there benefits of social? And then, of course, what are some of the strong cautions to watch out for? We'll talk about breast milk versus formula, also when to start solid foods and baby-led weaning. And finally, a top pediatrician's favorite dinner for busy parents. We've got this and more for you packed into this week's episode of Fueled Wellness and Nutrition.
Yay Networks.
A quick note before we dive into today's podcast. If you like what you hear, I would love for you to subscribe to Fueled Wellness and Nutrition, wherever you download your podcast. It would also be incredible if you take a minute to rate and review this podcast. Those things do matter and they really help us. We're talking all things kids wellness in this week's episode. We're talking kids nutrition, kids wellness, overarching wellness. We are joined by pediatrician Dr. Keely Carlisle to really sort through a lot on this topic. She is with French Broad Pediatrics in Asheville, North Carolina. She's been voted top pediatrician in that area for the past 7 years by the Mountain Express. Keely also happens to be my cousin. So welcome, Keely.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure, always.
No bias at all in having you with me. And also, fun fact, Keely and I were together the night that I met Brad, my husband.
That's right.
A fateful night. So I'll tell y'all the quick story, and then we're going to get into more on Keely and more on pediatrics. But truly, Keely, if it were not for you, I would not be married to Brad right now. I would not have even met him probably. So Keely, I grew up in Baton Rouge. Keely was in medical school, and you had a rotation in Baton Rouge. It was like 2 weeks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And in family medicine. Yeah.
So she's there for 2 weeks. She's staying with me in my apartment. I'm in college. She's in medical school. We both have been so busy, her with being there for that rotation, me with just, regular school or projects in college. And it was one of your last nights there. And I remember we were like, gosh, we haven't really done anything fun. We've just been studying. So we went to this coffee shop, Highland Coffees on the edge of LSU campus. And I remember we studied there till it closed. We were in study mode, no hair, makeup. I remember putting chapstick on and being like, that was it, hair on top of the head, big baggy sweatshirt with paint on it.
Yep.
And as that coffee shop closed, at 11, we go across the street to the Chimes, which is a local bar restaurant on the edge of LSU campus that I happened to work at, but I wasn't working that night. And so Keely and I walk in, it's late and it's packed. And we're like, it's a Wednesday night, it's packed. We had no idea why it was so packed. We didn't realize there had been some of the championships or kind of finals for LSU baseball. We had no idea. So we get there, it's packed. But the hostess kind of hey, slipped us a table, and so we kind of, essentially we cut the line. So we go there, we sit down, we're at the table, and then I see these two guys talking to the hostess, pointing over at our table. And I'm like, oh, Keely, I think this guy saw us cut the line. And the hostess walks over. I'm like, they're going to be asking us to leave. Well, the hostess says, hey, these two guys over there want to come sit with y'all. And I'm like, I said no. I was like, I probably waited on them. I was nice to them. And now they think I'm their friend. And since it's busy in here, they can come sit with me. I'm like, no. And Keely is like, oh, come on. It'll be fun. I was like, absolutely not. So between you and the hostess, y'all say, let's just let them, it'll be fun. They look nice, whatever. So we developed kind of a signal. And I said, if they're terrible, we do the signal to each other. We meet at the front. We're out of here. We're not going to let these guys spoil our limited time together. So they come over and then the rest is history.
It was kismet. It was meant to be.
And it was just really no one was in that space. In fact, Brad's friend Tripp, who was with him that night, he at that time even had the ring ready to propose to his now wife, Lauren. So they weren't in the space of let's, meet girls or anything like that. They were literally just joking around with this hostess and had no idea. And they were horrified when she actually took them seriously. So thank you, Keely.
Yeah, no problem.
In addition to that, a little fun fact about Keely. You were born and raised in New Orleans. You went to college to undergrad in Albuquerque. You did medical school here in New Orleans at LSU for medical school plus your residency. And then you stayed with the pediatrics here. And while you were here, I remember this really vividly. Like you worked, there was a weight management program that you worked with. There was a woman, Melinda Southern, she's still in this space, and working really closely with overweight kids and their families. And you were heavily involved in that, got your master's in public health through Tulane. And then after Katrina in 2006, that's when you moved to Asheville.
Yes.
And as we said, for the past 7 years, voted top pediatrician. I mean, that's really cool.
It is. It is. It is really sweet.
Keely may be the most modest person I know. She wonders how many people vote for this. But I think, she doesn't, you don't give yourself enough credit on this. Like that's a really cool accolade. And you have 2 daughters. You also, in addition to like working in private peds practice, you're also super involved with things like Girls on the Run and working with like youth organizations, running yourself, and just kind of, wellness is, I guess, part of your core.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So tell me, there's so much, you and I kind of put our notes together of where we think, there's a lot to cover in terms of what comes into your office and the questions that you get coming into your office. And when you were in New Orleans a couple of weeks ago or a month or so ago, we were kind of just talking about that. And there's like, just even in the past 5 or 10 years, it seems like there's been such a shift in like even questions and conversations. Let's start with social media. How's that? Like, what are you seeing on that? Like, what's the influence you see of how that's impacting kids' questions or parents' questions, all of this?
Oh my gosh. I mean, social media has had a huge impact, for sure. And I think like everybody, you see different sides to things. There are some positive things. But I think overwhelmingly what we have seen with kids has been a bit negative. Be it the time that they spend on it and then the quality of the messages that they're getting from it. So.
The time that they spend on it translating also to being sedentary. I mean, it's screen time.
Right, exactly.
And then the quality of the messaging being, whether it's about being marketed to by food industry on non-healthy foods, or what about things that are like trendy diets or dangerous kind of things, dangerous trends that they're seeing, or things that might kind of like stir up tendencies or predispositions for like an disordered eating. What are you seeing? Things like that people are coming in like, hey, I saw this on social.
Absolutely. And I mean, and already as a country and a culture, I mean, we've kind of struggled with what is the picture of looking healthy or looking good? Does that mean you need to be super skinny?
Right.
Body need to look like? And then you've got all these people inputting their opinions on what beauty is. And teenagers and small children are just much more impressionable to some of these ideas. So definitely I have had more kids who have different, what we call body dysmorphia, or, just feeling not good about their body for different reasons. And a lot of that I can directly attribute to messages that they have heard on different social media.
How are they expressing this to you? Like, how does that even hit your awareness?
And so part of what I do at a checkup typically now is that I talk generally about growth, and I think we'll talk about how we kind of measure that. But I actually try to insert a question about how do you feel about your body, or I might tell them, your growth on my charts is looking perfect. How do you feel about it? And and they'll tell me, oh my gosh, my clothes don't fit right, I look horrible, or I work out 5 times a day and I don't understand why this or that. So it definitely just comes up, but I do try to elicit it for sure.
I love that question too, because it's very neutral and it's very open.
Hmm.
It's not,
Yeah,
do you feel like you're a healthy weight? You're not, it's just literally, how do you feel about your body? And that can be interpreted in so many ways.
absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. What, I know that's just like, it's not like you're tracking it, but if you're just thinking, like, what percentage do you think has a positive response to that, like, versus a negative?
Um, and I guess it would depend on the different ages, because I mean, I start, kind of it's asking this in like school age. And
Yeah.
so, of course, teenagers, I get more negative
Yeah.
responses than I do at school age. But, uh, uh, yeah, it's hard for me to put a number on it, but I would say, I mean, it might be close to half and half
Yeah.
positive.
Which for
Yes.
the little ones, I'm sure that's like really heartbreaking.
Hmm. Oh,
It,
yeah.
especially when it's such a distorted self view. Yeah. And you're like, mm.
Yeah.
So, so social, I think it's just as it influences adults. There's so much on social that it puts these unnatural or unrealistic standards out there for us, And so looking at it and then thinking, having that comparison, if we as adults are doing that, how much are kids doing this? Do you talk with parents about kind of monitoring, or do you have that conversation with parents about their child's social media? Or is that like, I know there's so much else to cover. Is that kind of,
Yes, that is part of every checkup, is some sort of discussion, be it if your kid doesn't have a phone already, put it off as long as possible, to yes, be aware that these messages are out there. And so I would suggest that you are linked to their accounts in some way so that you can see. It should not be considered private. You pay for the phone. So,
right?
and so we definitely have conversations about that.
And you sent me some kind of, when we were looking at the pros and cons of social, you sent me a little bit of what some studies are showing in terms of engagement on social and kind of how that affects things. Share with us about that.
Yeah. And so, kind of going through, and there's been quite a number of studies that have been done over, I'd say, definitely the past 5 to 10 years, and so some people have done reviews of different things, and so some of the things that have been seen is that um, when analyzing how kids are engaging with different food or beverage brands, if they have more engagement, that led to more consumption of unhealthy foods. More use of social media increased the urge to eat, because it increases impulsivity. Because we know that social media, that whole dopamine release by
Right.
the likes and everything, and so those two things are tied together. Quite a few studies in kids show that more social media use was associated with skipping breakfast, increasing consumption of unhealthy products, but also consuming less fruits and vegetables. And of course, definitely more social media usage has been associated with increased disordered eating or activity levels, and more anxiety and more depression. And I've absolutely seen that in my patient population for sure.
It's impossible almost for it not to be. It's such an obvious thing that we see in
Mhm.
how social media has changed the ways that people communicate. That it's so much easier for people. And so when we think about us and then we translate it to kids, it's so much easier to isolate yourself,
Mhm.
but it can seem almost excusable. Like, oh, and before, if the person was just shutting themselves off in a room alone, that if you're like, oh, well, they're on their phones or this, there's things that maybe parents can excuse it a little bit more, but the reality is that they're really
Mhm.
isolated. There's, I think, so much on the mental aspects and like that depression, anxiety, along with, like you said, the more those phones are in our hand and the more screen time, the lower movement, but also kind of the obsessiveness, the self comparison, the anxieties. There
Mm-hmm.
are pros, we'll say. And one thing that kind of brought up is like the little movement challenges that can be on there or like the little dance challenges.
Uh-huh, absolutely. And I mean, my own teenagers, they'll come down to the kitchen and they do this dance. And I'm like, how, first of all, how did y'all learn those steps?
Right.
Can I do it? And I try to do it. Just can't. But the fact that all the kids are doing those, I'm like, well, that's cool. Because I feel like you got to practice it and you got to do it for a while. So that's been kind of a nice thing. And then yeah, the movement challenges, and some of those are more adults,
Yeah.
but kids are doing, which is cool. Um,
And more people are talking about like, and it's referred to specifically as meal prep, and they'll show how they're making their healthy snacks or healthy meals for the week. So there is some conversation on there, but I think we both agree that largely the positives are outweighed by some strong potential negatives.
yeah, absolutely.
Transitioning, totally different topic. This is one that, as you said to me earlier, it could literally be its own entire episode, but it's a hot one. Breast milk versus formula.
Hmm. And so, you know, breast milk or formula, that is a baby's sole nutrition from 0 to 6 months. Both of those things have everything that a baby needs. And breast milk obviously is the milk that is made for babies naturally. Um, but there may be reasons why somebody can't breastfeed, and so we do have formula, which is really nice for those times. Um, but breast milk has been shown to have some benefits for sure. I mean, obviously it's got antibodies from mom for different infections and things like that, so it can provide some protection for the babies while their immune system is more immature. Um, and but otherwise it provides everything that they need, and it's easy to carry, it's on the
Mm-hmm.
mom lines, there's no storage, there's and so in lots of those ways too, it's super nice. It does kind of put the burden on moms almost exclusively, in that sometimes it can leave other family members out, which can be a little stressful at times. But
Also, when mom goes back to work or things like this, like there's a lot there to
yeah,
navigate.
and and things like that can be a lot. And so I try to tell parents, especially new parents, there are two goals here: feed your baby something, and if you can do breast milk because that's what's made from, that's awesome. There is some connections to gut health too, to where we think that breast milk is better. um, but at the end point, it's feed the baby something, and then keep yourselves as parents sane. And they're and having that balance is like exquisitely important. So
So the benefits, if possible, breastfeeding, but
mhm.
not putting so much pressure on themselves if for whatever reason that doesn't work. You mentioned gut health, you mentioned immune system. Are there any other kind of, big heavy hitters that you would say are the benefits of breast
Uh-huh.
milk versus formula?
It's interesting because a lot of studies have been done, and there is some evidence that maybe there's a decreased risk of obesity later on. Um, but the thing that happens, because we also wondered if babies that were breastfed would be smarter or things like this. Um, but once they get to a certain age, there are so many factors that come into play
Right.
in these areas that it kind of washes out a little bit. And so, I tried to find a balance between saying, yeah, I mean, breast milk, we know it's made for the body. And I'm wondering if the more and more information that we have about gut health comes out, and, links later on to inflammation and things like that, if it will become even more important then. but I really try to make sure that there's not a lot of
Right.
stress that because that's a 6-month period of a kid's life, and we've got the next 80 years for other things to be a part of it. So,
And talk about the transition for babies starting solid foods and what that looks like. And what's the longest that you've seen somebody breastfeed?
um, I mean, definitely years. I've seen people do breastfeeding, and so there's different ideas associated with that. But um, babies need some extra things starting around 6 to 7 months. One of the biggest things being iron, and that's one of the things in breast milk. Um, the little bit of iron that is in breast milk is very bioavailable, so we suck it all up.
Mm-hmm.
But at 6 months, baby had gotten some iron stores from mom. Those are kind of being depleted. And so they need some more sources of iron. And so that's part of why solid foods start to be important. But at the same time, they should be losing a primitive reflex that they have called the tongue thrust. And it's a natural reflex where if somebody sticks something in their mouth, they automatically kick it out in case it's not supposed to be there. They lose that at 6 months, so that they're able to start keeping foods in. And then they also have more trunk control, so they're able to
Mm-hmm.
sit better at 6 months. And so that's when they're kind of ready for those things.
And so the readiness is one thing, and then baby led weaning, is that something that you work with parents a lot on?
It's a construct that has come up more recently, and it's kind of interesting in that the main, I think, and somebody might say differently about this, the main thing about it is that you're trying to feed babies what we eat, as opposed to thinking they have to have baby food. And so some of it is that, traditionally we have started them out with things like rice cereal or oatmeal and then purees. So it's all this really soft stuff, and then gradually work into textures. Baby led weaning is more like, okay, you're making a salad for dinner. Why don't you cut the baby, a big piece of cucumber that they could actually try to hold in their hand and then kind of gnaw on and lick and taste and experience. Um, and so from a couple of different angles, one is that we're using our foods, maybe that would tend to be more fresh, or hopefully it would, or whole foods as opposed to processed. Maybe less trash from having to buy products that are packaged. And then also letting them actually taste real food. And and the thing that is a little nerve wracking for everybody is that they're gonna gag on some stuff. They're gonna get some stuff in their mouth that it's not gonna feel good to them. They're gonna gag it up, but their gag reflex is there for a reason. And so, but
So
it's
don't
just,
panic. It's a
yeah. But if baby does gag, I mean, it's a natural instinct that you're like, oh my gosh, yeah. So I really love that it's focused on, trying to incorporate baby pretty quickly into what we're eating as a family. I really like.
And lately, there's been some things and some headlines about lead and other toxic metals in baby foods specifically. And
Mhm.
so that has maybe some people asking questions or rethinking the traditional baby foods they've been using. So, how do you answer, or how do you talk with parents about when they express their concerns about this?
Uh-huh. And so one, for those that have been using a lot of the baby foods that you buy, I mean, the FDA is really cracking down and saying that they're going to make sure that this is something that's monitored pretty closely, to try to get those out as much as we can. There are little bits of these metals in our food in
In
general.
any food, right?
Right. And so,
Right. It's not like baby foods have been specifically contaminated, you know?
right,
that
right. It
that these
might,
are through the normal food supply in trace amounts.
yeah. And how much they're related to people using pesticides or
Right.
whatever, I have to admit, I'm not knowledgeable about. But to avoid them completely, to me, is not necessarily the goal. The goal is to try to limit and not put ourselves, in getting a bunch of it. And one of the main goals is to make sure that we're eating a variety of things.
Mm-hmm.
If your baby is carrots, then there's a chance that whatever's in the carrots, could kind of build up and be more than what they need. But if we're doing a little carrots and a little sweet potatoes and a little apples and a little, so eating a variety of things, the thought is that you're less likely to have a buildup of those things.
And so to kind of be clear for our listeners, because it can be, it's like it's a horrifying headline, like there's lead in baby foods. And, the study that got a lot of press, showed that about 94% of store-bought baby food contained lead and 32% contained mercury. And so the FDA is looking at trying to reduce lead, by as much as like 27%. And they kind of announced this. And so that doesn't mean, as Keely said, it's closer to zero, but it's not zero being it. And the reality is that fruits and vegetables across the board absorb small amounts of lead and these other minerals from our soil, our water, even our air. And so even when you're looking at something, or organically raised, it may still have trace amounts of these. And so whether it's, through all of these different ways. And so even if you said, well, I'm going to make my own, there's still going to be the potential that it's got trace amounts. Then also, as Keely said, kind of rotating your vegetables, rotating your fruits is going to vary that. And then in theory too, if you think about like root vegetables, like a carrot or a sweet potato, where the whole thing is consumed, that's different than something that's being peeled or where that outer part is not going to be consumed. So like, something that has that thicker skin that's going to be peeled. So ultimately, realizing that there are trace amounts in everything, rotating it as much as possible. What other guidance do you say to parents who are really nervous about this?
The other thing, and actually it's interesting because it was part of our guidance anyway, is that kids don't really need to be drinking juice.
Yeah.
And other potential source. And you get more nutrition out of eating an orange than you do drinking a glass of orange juice because you have the fiber and things like those. And so we really have gotten away from having kids drink juice at all. And so that's another way that you could potentially limit that as well.
The exposure.
So,
the and juice, one of just to be aware that fruit juice, ounce per ounce, is about as much sugar as a regular soft drink, a regular sugar sweetened soft drink. And people are like, well, but it's natural. Well, yeah, it's natural, but it's still just as much sugar. And in some cases, depending on the juice, a little bit more. Tell me your thoughts on gummies, gummy vitamins.
And so, first of all, the gummy vehicle in because there's the gummy vitamins, the gummy candies, the fruit strips, all this, so sticky for the teeth, so sticky. And so I've had dentists call me and say I'm seeing a 1-year-old baby for a check-in, and they've got cavities. And then on history with the parents, the main thing is those parents decided they wanted their kid to have a vitamin, and it was a gummy vitamin. And so they really feel like that's the culprit. And so any of that stuff is just so sticky, and it provides no nutritive value. I mean, the gummies themselves are just sugar. And then I've even seen some, quite a few sources say that they feel like even gummy vitamins, like it's not a good vehicle to get the vitamin in.
Right.
So that don't absorb as well. So yeah, just bad. Avoid.
The notes that Keely sent said, I think gummy vitamins are evil. Tell me how you really feel.
Yeah. And I know we're always looking for something that the kids want to eat. They want to take it, because it's like candy. But if it's not even going to get the vitamins in and risk the possibility of cavities, to me, as somebody who has had to spend money on getting cavities fixed, it's just not worth it. And then the gummies with the sugar on the outside, really, I'm just like, oh my gosh. No.
And there's two things there. Number one, we're training kids to be accustomed to consuming these sugary sweet candies every single day, if that's the vehicle for it. And then two, when we look at the concentration of whatever nutrients are in gummies compared to a regular vitamin or mineral supplement, it's usually going to be a lot less. And so,
Mhm.
just kind of adults, if you're looking at something like, oh, there's vitamin D or omega 3s, and you see like a lot of times I see them at the register, like at the counter somewhere, it's like vitamin D or omega 3 gummies. If you were to look to see how much is actually usually in there compared to what would be in a normal capsule, it's often a fraction, not always, but often. So
Mhm.
gummies, no. And then your thoughts typically on a multi is like, you know what? If they're eating a varied diet, they don't need that multi.
Mhm. Yeah.
The way that I look at it for parents is I look at it as insurance, and kind of like that backstop so that if you're not sure if the diet is varied enough, then, adding a multi, not in a gummy form, but adding a regular kids multivitamin for most kids is going to be fine. It may not make much of a difference, but the worst you're going to be out is, a couple of bucks. They're typically not expensive. And so
Yeah.
the brand One A Day is one that's very approachable. It's very easy to find. And the brand One A Day passes quality tests and independent lab tests, so that's one that you could say is just an easy go to. And again, not in gummy form. Talk to me about this is one that I think is kind of like the elephant in the room is weight and kids and weight and the uncomfortable topic of addressing this with kids. Uh, I hear parents tell me, they'll often avoid the topic altogether. Sometimes clearly when a child has an unhealthy relationship with food or unhealthy habits, the child is a weight that may be unhealthy, but the parents are nervous. They don't want to, they're not sure how to bring this up. They don't want to trigger even more issues. And there's a lot of fears around this. So, what kind of guidance do you give parents?
And so, typically, since we're seeing kids over time, we plot their weight and height on growth charts, and those are standardized. There's charts for girls versus charts for boys. And so we're able to see their growth rates over time. And that to me is really important. Because a child who's maybe the 95th percentile or above the average kid for weight at their age, if they're the 95th percentile in height and so very tall, that's appropriate and I can give reassurance for that. If I see a kid who had been around the average but now has jumped up to the 95th percentile, then that's an instant red flag. But yes, I do try to tread lightly because there are lots of feelings behind weight. I have to take into account what parents may have gone through in their lives as far as weight is concerned. And then also different cultures feel different about, weight and body type. And so it can be tricky. It can be really tricky.
I would imagine in that conversation, there's often tears in the office
Yes.
from the kids
Yes.
and the parents. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And that's hard. And but that's also part of what I love about this job is that most of the time, these are families that I've known
Right.
for a long time. And so we've built a relationship. And so even though we've come to this uncomfortable place and there's tears, um, you know, I feel like we have a place where we can talk about it together. And then also I'm able to follow up, offer advice, kind of see if we can make some changes, see what effect those changes have. And so that's part of the beauty of this job and being able to follow people over time.
The trust that they have for you.
Yeah, 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 definitely. And especially here, Asheville is a bit smaller than New Orleans. Um, I see people all the time, or teenagers, for example, all the time that since my daughters are teenagers, they might go to the same school. I might see them out at sporting events, see them out at the mall, at the park, and assuring them that, hey, when we're here together, we're working on this, and this stays in this room. And when I see you out on the street, I'm not going to go up to you and go, "Hey, how are you
Right.
working, ditching those sodas?" No, it's this is here. This is what we talk about here. And if we see each other outside, we can just say, "Hey," and, not worry about it. And so, yeah, it's a big part.
What about the recent kind of changes that pediatricians are being asked to be more aggressive with things, with weight or overweight, looking at specific lab work? What are the new? Is it guidelines? Is it, how has that shifted in recent times with y'all?
It's been kind of a call to action recently, just to, because we know that obesity is associated with chronic conditions like diabetes and fatty liver and, things like that. That in the past, I mean, we're doing lots of counseling, but depending on where you are, whether or not you're going to send that kid who is afraid of needles to go get lab work done, you kind of, you might hesitate a little bit on that. Um, but the people who work in the chronic side of things, the endocrinologists, the gastroenterologists, and things like that, are saying, we might need to be a little bit more aggressive with trying to help those kids get their weight down in a safe way, so that we can avoid, going to the type 2 diabetes or getting the fatty liver.
Is there a conversation around like using any of the medications, the weight loss drugs with kids?
They're starting to be, and some of them I was actually surprised that Saxenda, which I've had a couple of adults that I know use, I think is actually approved down to age 12, and I just hadn't realized that. And so we asked our local, we have a pediatric group as part of that's connected with our hospital here, and they do educational lectures. And so we asked about, can we get one on specifically on these medications and what's available. So yeah, it's starting to be um, the gastric bypass and things like that.
Yeah.
Still, people won't really even touch somebody who's under 18. And so I've definitely had some kids or some teenagers who are like, "I'm just waiting to be 18, and then I'm gonna get myself over there."
That would just be a really hard space, because when we look at like a medication like Saxenda, we did a podcast in the past month or so. So those of y'all listening, if you want to hear it, we did one on like weight loss medications with a pharmacist here in New Orleans. And I mean, they're not without side effects and like really serious stuff. And so I would think that it would be difficult if you have a parent. Sometimes it can, I would imagine with adults, these weight loss medications are rampant right now. And
Mm.
every day, practically, I have someone saying, "Oh my God, everyone I'm talking to is taking like Ozempic or one of these." And there's different terms used, Ozempic face when someone's like saggy and they've lost. It's just become so common. But when you look at the side effects, like Saxenda that you mentioned being approved down to age 12, there's things that, at least as far as what they list as side effects, like pancreatitis or gallbladder problems, increased heart rate, kidney problems, like depression. Like there's just a lot there, but it's
Uh-huh.
such an, I don't know, I feel like our culture is like, but it's the quick fix.
Uh-huh.
And they
Yeah.
maybe people want to think that they don't want to open to what the risks are because they see that person they know who took it and had success, and all they see is that success, and they want that quick answer.
Mhm. Yeah.
That's gonna
Yeah.
be that's gonna be a lot.
It is. And then it's too, because our culture is still like, the skinny people are the healthy people. I mean, I felt like at a time we were starting to get towards where it was becoming more accepted that body types are different. Some people are bigger, but if you're doing healthy things for your body, then that's okay. And I feel like the pendulum's swinging the other way a little bit. And part of that is because of social media.
Yeah,
But
social media, or I'm 20 pounds overweight. Let me take these weight loss medications, and my I guess I don't want to say issue or problem with these, but my concern on these is when something can be such a quick answer or a quick air quote solution, then it's really easy for that person to not make those true, sustainable, lasting changes because they can take this medication, experience the weight loss, but has there really been the deeper work done that is addressing why these things are there in the first place? And so that's my thing too, is like, aside from the side effects, it's not really bringing about true, lasting change.
Hmm. Agreed.
Yeah.
I def-
I don't envy you for what that's going to be when that becomes more more common of people asking about these questions. And it'll be interesting to see, people, adults are so quick to try these things for themselves and kind of turning an eye to the side effects. So I wonder what parents' reactions will be when it comes to their children. Will they be more cautious or not?
yeah. It'll be interesting. And back in the old days, we used to just think teenagers, for example, are just little adults. And we know that the brain development that goes on during the tween and teen years is just a phenomenal amount of development, which means their brain is not fully functioning yet, and how they're processing the issue of weight and habits and health is different than how we process it as an adult. A teen can't see 5 or 10 years down the road, or
Right.
it's hard to see 5 or 10 years down the road. And so we really have to take into account that as well.
So going back to that uncomfortable topic of addressing weight with kids, um, I think guidance for parents is when they have the access to somebody like you, that someone who is an expert, someone who has that level of compassion, someone who can be kind of that provider support, whether it's their pediatrician, if it's a dietitian, if it's someone else that's in their space that can kind of help have that conversation in a compassionate way. We would also say, and Keely kind of alluded to this earlier, having the focus be on the positives, having the focus be on what we are doing versus not, versus like what we were giving up. And so nutritionally, one of the things that our dietitians with Oshner Fitness Center, we work with a lot is we're not going to say what is going to be limited so much or what's, dialing back on, but instead we want to make sure we'll put the focus on if they're going to be looking at something that they're tracking, for example, because sometimes people want to keep a log and we don't want a 12-year-old necessarily keeping that food log or counting calories and stuff. But what we
Mhm.
would say is, okay, well, let's put the focus on protein and calcium or fiber. Like, let's put the focus on the positives of what we are getting in with the
Mhm.
goal that that's edging out the not so healthy things. And so, same thing with behaviors and movement and things like that, when we can try to put the focus on the positives versus what you're, quote, giving up or getting rid of.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
And so finding someone you trust, finding someone who can address this from a real space of compassion, keeping the focus on behaviors, I think, relationship with food, not assigning, a lot of times we say not assigning like a morality to foods.
Mm.
I would say parents, please, if you're using the terms good and bad, stop. For the love of
Mhm.
God, stop. I can't tell you, like Keely, I'll be like going for a walk in the neighborhood and, there's a mom driving and she's got kids in her back and she's like, oh, I tried the Eat Fit king cake that y'all had and I really liked it, but I was so bad. I had some slices of regular king cake. And I'm like, well, so did your kids probably. And does that mean in their heads they're bad
Mhm.
because they had
Right.
this? So say parents really, it's not assigning morality. Weight is not a good or bad. And
Mhm.
even with anyone, we look at it as it's a starting point and it's where things are now. It's a snapshot and here's where we are now. This is simply what it is. And the conversation is about not, is this a good weight? Is this a bad weight? Is this anything? It's just more like, here's our starting point, and then what are the behaviors? And so parents, as much as possible, talking about relationships or attitudes. One thing, Keely, that I also really like the focus on is how do foods leave you feeling?
Mhm.
And so for a kid, if there's something that's just a real sugary breakfast or standalone snack, how's it going to leave them feeling 2, 3, 4 hours later versus that choice that's going to be more protein, fiber rich, that's going to be more energizing, more sustaining, more nourishing. And so speaking with things about, you know, that's more of an adult conversation, but adjusting things of how does it affect them? How does it leave them feeling? And talking more about, kind of that physical performance or mental performance versus weight. Those are
Yeah,
just some.
that's super, super important. Yeah.
Other things that would be ways that parents can like talk about, essentially it's behavior changes, but kind of framing it in a way that's not about weight.
Well, and I think it's exactly that, is not necessarily, not overtly connecting it to weight. Is like talking about, when we think about food, just we want to think about balance. We want to think about variety. And that means variety of the composition of our food. So having a little protein, having some starchy stuff, having fruits and vegetables, and just like you say, I mean, kind of focusing more on the habits around that are part of our life that can then shape what weight can be.
Right.
And so, I'm focusing on those.
This is a story, and we'll just say it. We won't assign if it's we won't assign morality to the story I'm about to share. I think there's an element of this though that I think is hilarious. There's a colleague of mine who shared that high sugar foods, especially sugary drinks, have been linked to certain types of cancer. And this person that I work with has two small children, and so she has, had these conversations with them about things like a regular sugared Sprite or Coke that they call them cancer water. So when they see a person just out in public
Oh my
having
gosh.
a Coke or a Sprite, mommy, look, that person's drinking cancer water. And I'm like, there's so much about that you could just really like that dive in, and it's sort of like the opposite maybe of what we're talking about with like a morality, but I also think that's kind of hilarious.
Uh-huh.
And she's just real matter of fact. She's like, yeah, my kids call it cancer water. Like she just owns it. So
Well, I have definitely told people or some kids before, if they're stuck on sugar drinks and it's really like, they're just hesitant to have the conversation about how it's not good for you. I'll pull out that, some people use some colas to pour on their car engines to get the gunk off. And so if this is a drink that can get the gunk off your engine of your car, just kind of think about that,
right,
you know?
right,
And then also I've had times related to different products where I might point out, this thing's not really good for you at all. And these people are making money off of you because you're
right.
spending to buy it. And so do you really want people essentially just stealing your money from you? Pulling out the financial.
And the ego, like don't fall prey to what they're.
Right. Are you going to let this person manipulate you like this? Sometimes that works. Depends on the kid.
Yeah. I think that would have resonated with me. We had a question through Instagram that's, and I think that you've already answered this, but I want to answer the question specifically. She had a question about a baby. It's her granddaughter. Or I would say it's a grandson. He's in the 95th percentile in height and the 90th percentile in weight. Her question is, he's 5 months old. He's still entirely breastfed. Is my daughter feeding him too much? But what I think I heard you say is that if a baby or a child is in that 95th percentile and the weight also corresponds in height and the weight corresponds, we would be great. This is totally fine. So because the height is also there. Now, if this baby was in the 50th percentile for height and the 90th percentile for weight, there might be concern.
Might be, though, you have to look at where he has been from the beginning.
Got it. Okay.
Out, and he was 50th percentile, but he was a chunky 9.5 pound baby. And then he's tracking along the 95th percentile with weight. And even though he's still average in height, that's just his proportions.
Right.
That's why the seeing people over time
Yes.
is so important. If I have a kid who was on the 25th percentile and now the next time they're here, they're up to the 95th, then I'm like, okay, wait, what has
Yeah.
changed? The growth charts are based on formula fed infants, I believe. Still, I don't think that has changed. And so I will have some really chunky breastfed babies or some really thin breastfed babies.
Mm-hmm.
And so really the seeing the growth trends over time is crucial. You can't just take that one point.
And then the last thing, your favorite fast meal, I think yours personally, maybe for busy parents.
Yeah, and so this is one, and we definitely use it here at the house. It's something called hayashi. It's a Japanese meal. It's a cold noodle salad, is basically what it is. But the the premise of it is when you get it from a Japanese restaurant, it's on some kind of noodles, and you can pick. But on top, you've got a variety of like, for example, sliced cucumbers, sliced carrots. Some protein, maybe hard-boiled egg, maybe some strips of some kind of meat, um, some bean sprouts. It's a variety of things on top. And it can be quite beautiful, especially if the things are different colors. But the nice thing about it too is there are things that you can pick and choose. These are things that you can have in your refrigerator, just already cut up and already prepped. And so if you've got very little time, it's something you can throw together and people can choose what they want.
It's also a good way to use leftovers.
It is a great way to use
Yeah.
leftovers. Yeah.
And the noodles that I love, there's all different very varieties of these, but like I love banza, the chickpea pasta, because it's typically, kids, gravitate toward it a lot of times because it's still white in color. It doesn't look
Uh-huh.
like a whole wheat pasta. It doesn't look different. But the reason I love like the chickpea pasta or something similar to that, there's chickpea, there's all different varieties. There's a lentil pasta that is like a yellow lentil, and so the color of it again still pretty familiar. There's also green lentil pasta, red lentil pasta. There's black bean pasta. There's edamame pasta. All of these are similar in that they are higher fiber, higher protein, and so especially if you have someone that really just they love the pasta part and not as much maybe the meat part, this is a way for them to get more protein in there.
Mm-hmm.
The reason I went straight to the chickpea or like I said, the yellow lentil is because visually they look kind of the same color as regular pasta. Although depending on the kid, a black pasta might actually be kind of cool, And so, but those I like because the pasta alone is giving that fiber, that protein. Then you can add in the variety that they can sort of add or pick themselves, almost sort of like the equivalent of a taco bar or station that you can kind of pick and choose. And
Right.
it allows them to have that own creativity of how they're building their meal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, summing it up, what's sort of like a takeaway that you would say is something just easy for parents to remember, just like a go to for us?
Uh-huh. Well, and thinking about it, nutrition, woo, it's just such a big topic. But um, I try to focus on covering just the general healthy habits that have been developed. It's in a 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 pattern. We should shoot for 5 servings of fruits and vegetables a day, at least 4 servings of water, 3 servings of low fat dairy or something equivalent if somebody can't have dairy, but something that has the calcium and vitamin D. 2 hours of screen time a day or less. That does not include screen for school, but for pleasure. And then at least 1 hour of physical activity a day. And then I usually add in if you can try for 0 sugar drinks, that's super nice. But if you can get generally in that area, and that is good for age 6 months to age 99 years, everybody can benefit from shooting for those healthy habits. And if you do it as a family, it's going to stick.
So 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0 if you're talking to Keely. And so 5 servings of vegetables and fruits daily, 4 servings or we could say cups probably of water, 3 servings of low fat dairy or something like the unsweetened almond milk or something that's also calcium fortified. 2 is for 2 hours of screen time or less. 1 is at least an hour of physical movement. And the 0 is for soft drinks. Something that I like is, it's something that I got from the book, The Happiness Advantage, is at the end of the day, having sort of like the conversation of what are 3 good things that happened today. And so that's sort of a nice thing, especially if someone's going through a stressful time in school, home, work, friends, whatever it is. Well, what are 3 good things that happened? Because all through the day, there's at least some glimmer that happened that was positive, even if it was like, the mailman said hello to you or whatever. Like there's going to be something that was like, well, that's maybe not a good example, but like if that's the best thing that happened to you, we have a really friendly mailman, but like hopefully that's maybe not the only positives, but the three good things, the reason I bring that up is that's something that I've encouraged people when they are having these challenging times, whether it's before bed with your partner or at dinner with your family, everyone comes through with it. If you're really working on household changes with your family, with your kids, that 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0 is sort of like it can be like a little verbal scorecard that people go around the table to, with no judgment, but more like a game, and the parents are fessing up too, did they get that movement? And then if people didn't get it, well, maybe there's a little quick walk after dinner or whatever it is, or whatever is happening that's, can be that movement. And so even if you don't do all of them, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0, if there were certain elements of these that you as the parent, or maybe your kids, that y'all find the challenge, that's a nice little kind of like the three good things, just bringing it so the family's talking about it and everyone's putting it out there. It's not that the parents are always doing it. And because of course kids love it when the parents don't do stuff right too.
That's true.
Or as expected,
Yeah.
All right. Anything else, Keely? This has been really good. I love having this conversation with you.
We could probably talk for 5 more hours.
Yes. And we'll do more. Cause as we get more questions about this and more follow-ups, I'll poke you and we'll do another topic, and there's some that, like you said, it could be an entire one that we dive into or drill into. So, all right. Thank you so much. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you. Thanks. Have a great one.
A tremendous thank you to Dr. Keely Carlisle for joining us. I was joking in the beginning, of course I'm biased when it comes to Keely and her passion, her knowledge, and just everything she gives into her role of being the best pediatrician possible for her patients. And I think that after hearing, you understand why I feel so strongly about that and why I was so grateful to have her joining us. I'll include the links that we talked about in the show notes of this episode, and let me know what you think. Also, if you have other questions, burning questions about kids, nutrition, wellness, things that you either would love to ask a pediatrician or have asked and still need some more clarity on, reach out, let me know. I am registered dietitian Molly Kimball, and you've been listening to Fueled Wellness and Nutrition, the podcast. And if you'd like more Fueled Wellness and Nutrition, please head over to mollykimball.com, and you can follow me, Molly Kimball RD, on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. And if you haven't yet, please go to Apple Podcasts and subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. Join us next week for another dose of Fueled Wellness and Nutrition. Thanks for listening, and stay focused on living your strongest, healthiest life.